right, hello and welcome, and thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Daniel Tim Claiborne, and I'm the Executive Director of the SARC Initiative, a New York-based nonprofit that galvanizes a global community of changemakers to advocate for greater Asian American inclusion, as well as advance positive social impact in U.S.-Asia relations through dialogue, storytelling, and our convening power. Today's webinar is entitled Progress or Backlash? Where do women stand in 2024? Featuring the distinguished Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author Sheryl WuDunn, as we explore the state of women's rights and empowerment in today's world. With the expertise of Sheryl WuDunn and the nuanced perspective of documentary filmmaker Maro Chermayeff, this event promises a deep dive into the complex narrative of gender equality for this year and beyond. This webinar is part of Serica's special series celebrating honorees at this year's API Women's Gala, which we're very lucky to count Sheryl WuDunn among. For the last 8 years, we've endeavored to shine a spotlight on visionary women leaders shaping U.S.-China industries. We have highlighted over 100 women in various industries looking to make their mark on the world and support peaceful ties between East and West. This year, it has evolved to honor API women with outstanding achievements and contributions in their respective fields. This year's gala will be held on May 14th at Tribeca 360 in New York. All proceeds will be going to support our efforts on API storytelling programs and causes. You can find out more information about the gala as well as how to buy tickets and our full list of honorees at our website. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce today's panelists whose full bios are available on our website as well. So Maro Chermayeff is an Emmy and Peabody winning film and television producer and programming executive whose vast portfolio of film work has toured the world in festivals, played theatrically, and been broadcast around the globe. She has been in numerous production partnerships, including PBS, HBO, CNN, and many, many others, garnering scores of honors and awards, as well as significant critical acclaim and ratings. In her role as producer and director, Maro has been directly responsible for creating over 100 hours of award-winning films, series, strands, and short-form content for public and cable television, as well as digital platforms. Thank you so much for joining us, Maro.
Thank you.
And we also have with us this afternoon Sheryl WuDunn, the first Asian American reporter to win a Pulitzer Prize. She is a business executive and best-selling author, as well as the co-founder of Full Sky Partners, which advises young companies in healthcare, biotech, and technology. She also serves on several for-profit and nonprofit boards, including Bay First Financial Corp, Harvard University Board of Overseers, Oregon Public Broadcasting, and the Northwest Cider Association. Selfishly being from the Pacific Northwest, those are all sound lovely. She has co-authored 5 best-selling books, including most recently Tightrope, Americans Reaching for Hope, A Path Appears, Transforming Lives, Creating Opportunity, Half the Sky, Turning Oppression into Opportunity for Women Worldwide, Thunder from the East and China Wakes, The Struggle for the Soul of a Rising Power. Please join me in welcoming Maro and Sheryl, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sheryl for some brief opening remarks. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining our webinar, Women, Progress, and Backlash. And thanks to Anla, Michelle, and Daniel for arranging this webinar, and to Maro for joining it with me. As you all well know, we've seen great progress in women's rights. When Nick and I wrote Half the Sky, life was pretty grim for women around the world. Women were dying every few minutes from giving birth. Girls were dying in droves before they even reached the age of 5. And they weren't staying in school. In many places, they were being genetically, basically cut when they became teenagers. Over the years, we saw tremendous progress. Maternal mortality has fallen by half. Girls are now surviving beyond the 5 years of age, and they're getting vaccinated. They're going to school in droves and reaching parity with boys in elementary school. Laws were being passed banning FGM. In the grand scheme of history, I saw how life had improved for women, especially in India and China, since the days when my grandmother's feet were bound. Women became increasingly educated and important in these economies. And now I want to show you a video trailer from Half the Sky.
The challenge that women and girls face around the world is not an easy topic to talk about, but we really think it is the moral challenge of this century.
These problems exist because we've created them, so it's up to us to fix them.
The way that Nick and Sheryl use stories to break through the indifference that still exists when you talk about women and girls is exactly the right way to go about it.
We understand the story, always. This is how people get engaged.
Nick and I wanted to galvanize people into action because we know it takes a world to bring about this change. We're utilizing every tool and platform available to get the message across.
We're going to be going on a journey to some of the places in the world where the repression of women and girls is truly at its most extreme.
I read Half the Sky and I thought, that's really what I want to do. I want to go and see things for myself.
You've had the traffickers hold a gun to your head.
You're going to take their own money, the girl is their money. Of course they're not happy with you.
It still does seem as if something is wrong if thousands of girls are getting raped, and in all of Freetown only one rapist is prosecuted.
You know what lasts longer than beauty? Being smart lasts a lot longer than being pretty.
This little hospital, built on a garbage dump, has reduced maternal mortality rate of the women who come here to 1/4 of the national average.
We need to be able to have our voices heard.
Our biggest challenge here is to create opportunities. Convince the mothers every single day of her existence that your daughter does not have to be bound by fate. She needs to be allowed the power to create her own fate.
Well, that gave you an inkling into what kinds of things, we saw the changes that people were making, and there was some remarkable progress. However, there's always a but. We have seen some setbacks, and in many cases, gender equality is going in reverse. The Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, goal number 5 is to reach gender equality by 2030. I want to quote the head of research at Oxfam in Great Britain. He said, "This is truly alarming and explains why the world is completely off track in achieving gender equality by 2030. He was prefacing a UNDP report that showed that we are woefully lagging against the SDG goal number 5. So here's an example. I got an email from a friend who founded Tostan, whose mission is to eradicate FGM, female cutting. Gambia had banned FGM in 2015. Last year, 3 cutters were trying to illegally cut young girls, and they were caught in the act, arrested, and detained according to the law. An angry religious leader went and paid the fines, and to get them, not only to get them out of jail, but also he went and lobbied to have the law repealed. His backlash went all the way to the top. The legislature debated it in December, but didn't come to a decision. They debated again on March 4th, earlier this month, and postponed again. For now, women are okay, but the law could be repealed, provoking a setback potentially to other African countries that also have laws banning the practice. It is likely to be reintroduced in Gambia, and local groups like Tostan are fighting to organize. Research by the UN Development Program found that half of people in 80 countries believe men make better political leaders. 40% believe that men are better business executives, and 25% believe it is justified for men to beat their wives. These figures are from data collected from 2017 to 2022 and were largely unchanged from the previous 2020 UNDP report, which used data from 2005 to 2014. In Asia, you can see an actual backlash to the progress of women. In Japan, men are afraid of asking out progressive, aggressive women, people they view as progressive, aggressive women. Quote, "There are a lot of men who find women scary. This Anno Matsui told the BBC. About a quarter of young Japanese adults are virgins, and 60% of unmarried young adults there say they have no relationship with the opposite sex. Is Japan literally becoming the land of the setting sun? What happens to the future of Japan's society and economy? South Korea is even worse. The rise of the feminist movement has provoked a real anger. In 1990, South Korea's sex ratio at birth was 117 to 100. So for every 100 baby girls born, there were 117 boys born. But after women and girls gained status, it became more normal to 106 to 100. But what's happening now is that marriage rates have plummeted in South Korea as women refuse to marry misogynist men who they think are misogynist men. And they, in turn, have reacted by further berating South Korean women and creating deep fakes, actually deep fakes of the women who they don't like. Fertility rates in South Korea are 0.8%. So that means that an average number of births of a woman in South Korea that she will have in her lifetime is 0.8%.
I think Sheryl has frozen, so we'll have to hold on for a second to see if she becomes more stable or comes back on her cell phone.
Sorry, I thought I was going to make it all the way through, but I was talking about in the music world in South Korea, fans expect their celebrities not to date men. And, some of it is because they expect the singers to be so devoted to all the fans that there's a sense that successful women also don't need men. So Karina of the K-pop group aespa had to apologize after fans got so upset when they found that she was dating actor Lee Jae-wook, a man, and she had to post a handwritten apology online. Her outraged fans even sent a truck with an electronic billboard to the headquarters of her agency. Do you not love us enough, your fans? And why did you choose to betray your fans? Or please apologize directly, otherwise we're not going to buy your albums anymore. So the success in women's rights has unleashed a backlash in many places. And one prominent researcher who has written a book, Brad Wilcox, he says that South Korea may be America's future, that America can look across the Pacific to see what lies ahead for it. Well, here in the US, we also have a slipping birth rate, but it's a little bit different. Empirically, we see a split in child bearing. The educated elite are having fewer kids, while the less educated are still having more kids than the affluent, but a growing percentage of them are not married. The highest correlated factor to poverty and not getting out of poverty is being raised in a single parent household. That has its own implications for society in the long run. In another trend, the US is in general a much more divided country than many other westernized nations when it comes to cultural issues. And cultural polarization often leads to political polarization. According to some polls, parents would be much more disappointed if their children married someone from the opposite party than a different religion. And maybe this isn't so surprising because of the secularization going on in this country, but the result is that secularization has also galvanized people on the Christian right. And this dividedness has led to extremes, as you all know, on the right and the left, and has helped fuel action, including the anti-abortion movement. But I want to close my opening remarks with a story about girl power, because I think girl power is still alive and well. So let me just talk about a small story. One day last month in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, 5 middle-aged women set out for a long bike ride. All athletic. They were racing cyclists. They were equipped for their ride, the helmets, the biking gear, the road bikes. They were out on the path, and suddenly 2 cougars jumped out at them. The older mother ran away, but the younger one lunged at Carrie, who is 60 years old, and tackled her off her bike. He sunk his teeth into her jaw and pinned her face to the dirt. He ripped her earring out of her ear. Her 4 comrades mobilized to fight the cougar. One pulled out her 2-inch knife to stab the cat. Another tried to choke the cat and tried to pull the jaw off of her friend. Another grabbed the cat's leg. Finally, someone had the bright idea of taking the bike, one of their bikes, and just covering the cougar on it and standing on top of the bike to pin down the cougar. They all started standing on the bike to pin down the cougar. Someone called 911, and 30 minutes later, the fishery and wildlife policeman came. He shot the cougar, but it was really these women who, with their bare hands, had basically killed the cougar. That's girl power. And so I'm hoping that, as Deng Xiaoping said, progress is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but there's still progress.
A highly positive, if the world we face is a cougar, maybe we can all group that strongly. Just for a little background, you know, as a filmmaker and within my company Show of Horse, we actually made the series for public television, national PBS, with Sheryl and Nick, based on their books Half the Sky, A Path Appears, several years later, and then Tightrope. I'm interested because I found it very interesting at the time, the evolution of those 3 books. I mean, talk about the early seeds for you and Nick, Sheryl, where you were living in China, and when did you begin to see, wait a minute, women are really getting the raw deal here? Like, how did that come to pass that you really noticed this?
Well, I think the first major time that we noticed this is when we were doing some research, for the New York Times, but also for our book. And we discovered that it was related to the one-child policy. And we discovered that there were 30 million missing baby girls in the Chinese population. And that is the result of some brilliant work done by Amartya Sen, an economist, a Nobel Prize-winning economist. And we thought, this is horrible. I mean, how did those girls go missing? Was it because infanticide, a bucket of water, when a little baby girl is born? We thought, well, yeah, they're missing from the population. And towards the later years, of course, it was because of sex selection with the sonogram. But we thought that's just China. China's full of good and evil, and that's one of the evil sides. Then we went to Asia, and we were based in Japan. And of course, I saw, firsthand how Japanese women were treated. The word for wife, as some of you know, oksan, means back of the house. So the woman you called your wife, Mrs. Back of the House. She's supposed to stay in the back of the house, doing all the cooking and cleaning and all that. And she also walks, tradition is that she walks behind her husband, not beside her husband. Korea also really, it was a very patriarchal society, as I referred to earlier. And then when we thought, oh, this is just Asia, we came back to the US, and Nick started traveling to Africa, to other places, and he saw, my goodness, this is happening in Africa that I'm seeing. It's happening in other parts of the world that I'm traveling to. We thought, gosh, maybe this is a little bit more, it's like more global than just Asia. And so that became Half the Sky. And as we were doing our research for the book, it turned out that there was enormous amount of women power through, social entrepreneurs throughout the world, women who had said, I'm not going to take this sitting down, I'm going to do something about it. And so Half the Sky was really about a lot of the solutions that these women had come up with, whether it was, how to improve maternal mortality, or how to improve sex trafficking, or how to improve, the world of brothels that women find themselves in so many places in Asia. So then you saw the trailer.
And when do you think you began to realize, as someone with, for those who don't know, Sheryl has an amazing financial background and expertise, as well as being a journalist, and you were writing about finances in that part of the world. At what point did you begin to realize, or do you think it was more widely understood, that empowering women, educating women, is the way to lift a community? How did that come to be known?
So it really was, as we were doing research, and we started discovering that, when you start giving the household purse strings to women, they spend more money on their kids and they spend more money on healthcare, which is not the case. When men control the purse strings, when cash crops belong to them and they get to spend it, they get the money, they spend it, then they tend to spend more money than, a woman would on alcohol and cigarettes. It was just empirical. This is not, an opinion. This was empirical evidence when people actually were looking at, what was happening in some of these economies. The other thing that really struck me is that when, we were doing this research, a prominent economist had said that one signal that he looks at to determine whether an economy has long-term, viability, whether it's going to thrive, is he looks at the role of women. If a society is open enough to embrace women and bring women into the economy, it's going to be able to withstand the ebbs and flows and the tornadoes and the winds and the storms of an economy that other economies that are much more closed and rigid would not be able to withstand.
So in your view, have you seen the financial empowerment of women, the purse strings being held, that really actually changing, economic development and personal development within small communities around the globe?
Oh, we've seen so many examples of where women go from, being, oppressed to actually really playing a huge role. So Mahabuba, for instance, is a woman who was 13 at, when this happened to her. She was married against her will, and in Ethiopia, and then she got pregnant against her will. She went to the bush to have her kid. She was frightened. She didn't know what was happening, and she had a fistula. Which it means that you rip the insides of basically of your system are ripped, and you can't control your wastes. So she crawled her way back to the village, and they all thought that she was cursed because she smelled so badly, and she had this fistula and was leaking her wastes. And so they put her at the edge of the village in a hut, and they left the door open so that the hyenas would get her at night. So that night she took a stick and she fought off those hyenas all night. And the next day she remembered that there was a doctor, a Western doctor in the next village. And so she said, I'm going to get to that next village and get to this doctor. I need help. And it turns out that doctor, that village was 30 miles away. And so she couldn't walk because of the damage done. So she crawled her way. And at night, she basically climbed trees so that the hyenas wouldn't get her again. And she ended up finding the doctor, basically landed half dead on his doorstep. He took one look at her and knew exactly what had happened. He took her to the, Addis Ababa Fistula Hospital and repaired her fistula in no time, a $300 operation. And the people saw that she was not only a survivor, she was smart and intelligent, and they made her a nurse. So she's been a nurse at that hospital.
Well, it's amazing. I think that both of you over the years have said to me that in the bleakest of circumstances, you sometimes see the strongest and meet the most incredible people, because there is a will to survive and a will to thrive that that women can exhibit like nobody else. It's just.
Well, I think that we're going to need that, because going forward, I mean, we've mentioned some setbacks, but there are a lot of setbacks in the US, which is very disappointing. But I do, there are some reasons for hope. We know that this is an incredibly divided country. since Roe v. Wade, we all know about that setback. On the one side, we have abortion is legal in now only 27 states. There are added protections in 21 of them, but there's in contrast, 14 states have banned abortion with limited exceptions. And in 7 more states, they've implemented laws that restrict abortion access on the basis of how pregnant you are, how far along you are. So in the first year after Roe v. Wade, we can look back and we see that there were 10% more abortions in 2023 over the previous year where there were statistics, which happened to be 2020. And more than 100,000, 160,000 people traveled out of state to have an abortion because of these states banning abortion. And so women are getting around it. Just today, there was a real potential setback. I mean, we're not exactly sure, but the trial, the hearing for mifepristone before the Supreme Court, as a result of this one judge in Amarillo, Texas, that basically said, mifepristone was actually, approved illegally by the FDA, or, there was a plaintiff actually who brought the case to say that we have to, get rid of mifepristone. It turns out that it's been around so long, and there's such a long, strong history of it that they couldn't go back that far. But in 2016 and in 2021, there were loosenings of the use of mifepristone, such that now you can use it, you can get it telemedicine, you don't have to go to a clinic. So those are at risk, but it looks like maybe the Supreme Court doesn't really want to get involved in that. That would be a victory for women, at least. I don't know if victory is the right word, because it just means keeping the status quo. But there are so many challenges that we hope we'll be able to work around.
Do you feel like when you see the attacks go at women's control over their body, women's control and decision making, that those attacks are coming because the people in opposition realize that taking power away from women is a way to gain control over a larger, part of the population? It's just if you knock down women. So every time you were saying earlier, you take a step forward, you take 2 steps back. In this country, I mean, look at the things that came up with the MeToo movement, for instance. I mean, women are in a constant state of fighting. I mean, we may have lost Sheryl again. She'll have to go and come back. I mean, the interesting thing, and I'll just chat briefly while we're getting her back, is that when we were making our films, and Tightrope is all throughout the U.S., we really kind of realized that women are a real target for people, because if you can control the women in a population, you can really change the success of a community. So it's very, very very, very notable. And when you look at the Me Too movement, one would see that as progressive, because women were finding their voice, being heard. That has to happen all around the world, and we see it in these different extremes. But it's quite interesting. Oh, Cheryl's back! Yay! I was going on a lecture about the inequity and the empowering of women. But I mean, why do you think things like the Me Too movement? What do you think of the woman's voice, like being heard, having your challenges heard by the people?
The Me Too movement was very interesting because it did have some really good concrete results. I mean, it elevated awareness. It empowered survivors who felt that, yes, they could speak out finally and not suffer retribution. There was accountability because, men all over were being fired from their jobs for, sexually harassing women. There were actually legal reforms. States actually put forth laws banning sex trafficking. They prompted governments to reassess those policies on sexual harassment and assault and make them stronger. So there were some really good outcomes. And the fact that Ashley Judd was willing to come alive and come forward to talk about this was a real tribute. But I have to say that how long lasting is this? What scares me is that although Me Too raised awareness, we have someone like Trump who loses a case against Jean Carroll, where, basically he kind of date raped her. I mean, sort of, wasn't using the R word explicitly, but yeah, he did that. And still, people still want him to become president. So that's a sign that, well, maybe, what is really long lasting?
Another big setback that we've talked about is COVID-19. And I think people talk about COVID in a million different ways, but how do you see it affecting these particular issues that we're talking about today?
So COVID really was a setback. I mean, it was certainly, first of all, it was a setback for everybody. We had no idea what was going to happen with our lives. But for women in particular, when schools closed, it meant that the major caregiver, usually the woman, was going to have to stay home from work if she couldn't work remotely. And so that was a problem. Women, left the workforce in droves. And it was really in states that actually closed schools. And I have to say that, Florida, I'm in Florida right now, that was a state that didn't close schools. New York did, California did, Oregon, Washington, they all closed schools. But I think in many ways they were wrong. At the time we thought, that made sense, but no, they were wrong, because not only did women, it was bad for women, for mothers, it was also bad for the kids. The kids really lost a couple of years in their schooling, and you can't get that time back. And so what's encouraging, this is an example of a setback where we've actually recovered. So now, employment of women is back to normal. It's back to pre-pandemic levels. I mean, people have recovered. The kids still have lost their 2 years of that school life, but hopefully they're going to make it back up. And economically, women are back. So I think that's kind of I wouldn't call it really a success story, because it was a terrible thing that happened to everybody, and to everybody, not just women. But I think we have recovered. That's a case where we have recovered.
You were talking a little bit earlier about Joe Biden's State of the Union, and I mean, this is before we were online, and talking about some of the comments that he had made, and talking about women's empowerment, and like, where are we going? What's the recovery? What's the good picture?
Well, so I think he did make a statement in a State of the Union where he said, just watch out, because, women have a lot of influence. And so the question is, what did he really mean by that? Did he mean that at the elections, they're going to show their anger, or they're not going to, vote for people who want to, take away some of women's rights? That's may have been his implication. And certainly in the midterm elections, we have seen that women have voted that, we care about our own rights. It's a very complicated issue, but it seems as though the vote has gone in the direction of, women's rights are really important to us.
We've talked about, in my own industry, there has been constant discussions in the film and television world about, not only women being employed. Gina Davis has been a long advocate of equality within the industry, and there has been, such a social, cultural phenomenon with the Barbie film, which is very funny because it's actually a film about a doll, but a doll that's gone on for been active for decades and decades and decades, but suddenly the personification of this doll. But it really touched a nerve with people. It really made people think about it, and it's being used, and I don't know, rightfully so. I'm wondering what you think about this kind of phenomenon of this being a woman's movie, an empowering movie. Did you feel it was?
Well, I think that hopefully, I think they were actually trying to reach everyone, men and women, because I saw in there kind of the backlash. You had, Ken basically, he was the backlash. He actually said, no, I want more power. Patriarchal society. What? How come we don't have that? So that was the backlash. But then you also saw them recovering. And that's the hopeful side of it, that, we really do want to recover rights, but we don't want, it's not kind of an us versus them. It shouldn't just be Ken versus Barbie. It has to be Ken plus Barbie. It has to be men plus women, because we still, if we want progeny, if we want this world to survive, it needs babies, and it needs babies to grow up to be adults, and the cycle to repeat itself. So we really want hand in hand to sort of have gender equity, so that people can work together and feel that their voices are being heard, and women are progressing, not only in terms of being able to, have a say in their, with their own bodies, but also in careers, in the workplace. Women have made a lot of progress in the career ladder. There are many more CEOs at the top of corporations than ever before, but it's still a minority. There are many more women in senior positions, on boards, on executive teams. It's still a minority. I thought it was interesting, even in Barbie, they were all men. I was hoping that the one sentence when someone asked America, what do you think? That she was going to say, I'd like to be CEO, instead of saying, how about an ordinary Barbie?
It's funny because the people that have been on this, been sort of carrying this torch for a long time are all women that traveled and worked with you and Nick in Half the Sky and A Path Appears.
Yes,
Ashley Judd, America Ferrera, Olivia Wilde, Eva Mendes, who is married to Ryan Gosling. These are all the women in at least in Hollywood who have been carrying this torch of power for a long time. So for me, when I saw America, who was with you and Nick in India, working in child prostitution at a wonderful organization called New Light, who was working with women and children of women of. It was, I felt like, oh, go America. And of course, I love that her name is America, so she could really carry the torch. But yeah, how do you think things are going to change? Where do you see things going for, as we head into this, election year, as you say, more divided than ever? Now what? How do women keep it going? Because
I think that, with a super majority, conservative majority in the Supreme Court, I think women are going to have to show vote what they feel, and really show what they mean with how they vote. I think that's going to be the major way that people will, that women, will have a voice, because right now, they're still going to have to keep fighting. It's again, you can't take, rights for granted. The Roe v. Wade thing was really unfortunate, but if enough states want to, at least, we've got 29 states that still allow abortion. Hopefully, maybe over time, states will reverse themselves on that. Let's hope that let's hope that we will be able to still see progress. I see that we're going to be voting.
One point I remember when we were talking around the time of making Half the Sky or Path Appears, you said it's not that these solutions for women, in the US or in these very challenging circumstances in some of the global South, or it's not that these solutions are rocket science. It's not so difficult. Can you talk a little bit about, really the things that really can make a big difference are also then have to be married to political will?
I think that one of the biggest differences is that people have to get engaged. And, I think that there's a little bit more engagement because of the political things that have happened in recent years. But we need to get more people out to vote. We need to have much higher rates of voting. I was really struck because in Taiwan, they had the elections in January, and they had like an 80 to 85% rate of voting, which is, we've never gotten that in a presidential election. I mean, people flew home because you have to go to your hometown to vote. You can't just vote anywhere, and there's no absentee ballot. People flew from the US to Taiwan to vote. It would be great to have that. And I think that we need a little bit more political engagement, and we need engagement in civilian life as well. Because of the way technology has proliferated in our lives, we can actually just spend all our time just on our computer. But our civil society is kind of in a sort of all mixed up. It's chaotic. Churches are, on the decline. People aren't going to church as much. Civic groups are on the decline. All these different Rotary clubs, there aren't as many members of those clubs anymore. We need other more modern forms of civic engagement, of building communities, which is actually the kind of thing we're trying to do with Christoph Farms. We have our own cider and wine clubs, and we want to create a community around those people and have virtual discussions around them to create communities so that people can stay engaged, find ways to stay engaged.
We have a few questions that are coming from our audience. One of them actually says, do you think that the answer is that women shouldn't be having children in order to maintain their independence?
Well, so this is what's happening in South Korea and Japan, as I mentioned earlier, that the fertility rates are really low. In South Korea, it's 0.8%. Replacement is 2.1%, which means, their population it will have in a generation if that rate stays where it is. So I don't think that's the solution. We don't want to, go into oblivion or go into extinction. We still want to, have more women grow up and keep on fighting. But I do think that we're going to have better answers and better solutions for managing our lives, for managing childcare. In Europe, which is very interesting, it's almost like a right that they have childcare, a right to childcare, which we don't have here. They have a right to great preschool education, which we don't have here. So there are a lot of things that we can do in the US to actually improve, the environment so that women can do both, have children and also have a great career.
And someone else is asking, how do we raise women out of religious circumstances where they aren't allowed schooling, like Afghanistan, for example?
Yes, that is really tricky. And then it's the secret schools. I also hear that in some cases, because the Taliban, in some cases, they want their own kids to go to school. They want their girls to go to school. So they kind of turn a blind eye. Not all Taliban members are just so, extremely religious in that regard. I think there is that moderate middle. And so school is getting, education is being taught to, or getting through to girls, but far less than it was before the Taliban took over. No, that is a real struggle.
And we see here that, just financial or lack of opportunity, lack of preschool programs, every time that you engage a community and you can, get people at the jump. I mean, that was one of the things you talked about at Tightrope, is how does a community change when you start educating, not just girls, but girls and boys at a much earlier level? The whole community can change. Uh-oh, I think Sheryl might be frozen again. So I'll read another question in hopes that she has returned by the time of this. Someone has said, what do you think of the effectiveness of the Sheryl Sandberg lean in phenomenon? Are we seeing more women on boards? Has this lost momentum? Well, I hope Sheryl will come back to answer that, because of course there are more women in schools, there are more women on boards, there are more there are more women leaders in university settings. But I think we've seen recently, you know, in at Harvard and other places that this has, you know, not gone as easily and as on an unrocky path as we would have hoped. I was just slightly answering the question, what do you think of the effectiveness of the Sheryl Sandberg lean in phenomenon? Are we seeing more women on boards? Has this lost momentum? And I said, yes, but then you see also the issues at Harvard, et cetera, that happened this year.
Yes, again, that's progress and backlash. So I think lean in certainly contributed to it as well. I mean, it contributed to the progress. And, you know, I think that there has been a huge amount of progress. The fact that there was a Black woman who became the president of Harvard was amazing. But on the other hand, there was a backlash. I think people used the far right. This was really, all the reporting was done by a far right publication that basically started, you know, looking through her record to find these plagiarism issues. And then, you know, you had hedge fund managers like Bill Ackman who amplified it because of his great following, and basically were able to mount this campaign that led to her, you know, her stepping down. And funny enough, Bill Ackman's wife, who was a professor at MIT, also had very similar plagiarism issues. But when people pointed that out, he got really upset. So, you know, there's a double standard there. But I do think that there was progress, but backlash. People don't like the DEI movement, and they saw this as an opportunity. Look, Claudine Gay made some mistakes. Her congressional testimony for 5 hours was great, but that you know, 4 minutes was terrible. But you know, I do think that she was extremely talented and capable woman, and leader, a very talented leader, and had been identified very early on as a talented leader. So she was not just a DEI hire; she really had been working her way up. And in a corporate environment, she would have been a great manager because she's a good manager.
How do you, another question here is, how do you think AI will help women's causes?
So
how do you see the integration of
I think that AI certainly can help women, but I don't know if you saw my husband's article about deep fakes. AI is actually also can be used by evil people to really create havoc. And that's what's happening, is that, you know, he has people putting up fake you know, Nick Kristof Facebook pages all the time. And that's what's happening with these celebrities. There are, you know, the ones I mentioned in South Korea, what's happening is that the men who are angry at women, they're putting up deep fake, you know, ID, you know, fake pages and postings for the women, you know, who they are targeting, to the point where it's really horrible, because if someone uses AI to create a photo of you, and a naked photo of you, right? It looks like you're naked. Facebook can't take it down because it's not your photo. They can't say, well, you can't ask me to take it down because it's not yours. Someone else put it up. So it has to stay out there. It's just a crazy, you know, rule that they have, and makes it even harder for women who are being deep faked to, you know, rectify things.
Well, additionally, with AI, we've talked about it a lot. I'm a chairman of a film department. The applications are not written by the students applying anymore. It's becomes, you know, quite difficult.
Right.
But someone else is asking, why are these backlashes happening, and how do you unite women of different color and race, et cetera? It's a big question.
That's a big question. Do you mean unite women together or unite men and women?
I think they're uniting women. Their question is, how do you unite women of different colors, different races, et cetera? How do you get women to be backing women? I guess that's an important thought.
Right. Well, you know, I think that's what Barbie was trying to, you know, actually spread, right? Women coming together, and whereas, you know, trying to divide the men so that they, you know, are going against each other, and trying to show that women actually can work together in order to push forward the fight. And, you know, I'm hopeful that that actually will happen. I mean, I think historically there has been this, I don't know if it's a myth or reality, but they say, oh, women, you know, don't help women. I think the early leaders who were women, some had a reputation for not helping women. I don't think that that's entirely true, because I think women have helped women. But, you know, there were some probably who had a reputation for not helping other women. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first female medical doctor in the US in the 1800s, she was notable for not helping other women, except kind of her sister get an MD degree. You know, so it's hard because women feel that they fought so hard to get to the top. If someone else wasn't up to their standard, why should they help them? So I think that that's changing now, because it's been identified as a problem, and women really are helping other women. You know, but I don't know how much research or evidence there has been on that question.
And one woman is asking here, what advice for women do you have, and how would they respond to someone that's actually saying a comment like, you're just a DEI hire, you're here because, you know, I think that is something that comes up. I definitely hear that backlash out in the streets of, you know, people are getting jobs they don't deserve to get. It's, you know, it's harsh things are said.
Right. So a couple of things with regard to just, you know, hiring. I'm also right now on a search committee looking for a CEO for a position for something. And my focus is on, you know, you want to have a diverse pool of candidates, which was very frustrating because from my point of view, it's one thing. From another point of view, it's different. So for instance, this is in Oregon, and there are, you know, a couple of you know, people who are racial minorities. They wanted a very diverse pool, but diverse to them meant we wanted African Americans in it. And they really cared that half the pool was African American in a state that is 76% white. And so one of the guys who was saying basically, I'm so delighted that we have a really diverse pool. You know, we're leaning into it by 2030, you know, Oregon's going to be 30%, you know, minority, racial minority. And I said to him, well, let me tell you that right now, women are 50% of the people in Oregon, and in 2030 they will be 50% of the population as well. But we have tiny amount of women in the pool, so I don't think it's very diverse at all. I think that, you know, everybody has a different view of what diversity is, but I think that race can be a factor, but it shouldn't be the determinant in hiring someone. And I don't think in the cases that I've seen that ever was, like, for instance, with Claudine Gay, it never was the reason she was hired. She's a very talented woman, extremely talented woman, and she was the best one of the candidates. She's just stood out. So people would say, oh yeah, I'm happy that she happens to be Black, but everyone just hooks on the fact that she's, you know, a DEI candidate, even though she was the most qualified candidate in the pool.
But what's distressing though is how quickly people jump on a bandwagon, and the people that must have fought hard to bring some of, you know, not just Claudine Gay, but there's others as well who were taken down pretty quickly. And you think to yourself, well, where were all the supporters when where were the people who must have been fighting tooth and nail to get them in that job? Why wasn't it shut down more? So it's interesting.
It's very interesting. I think what we have to do, and this is what universities are trying to do when they bring in, you know, racially diverse candidates, they also realize they have to bring in they have to create a support system. And I think that has to be done for leaders as well, who will probably be attacked if they are a minority candidate. You know, it's just inevitable someone's going to try and attack them. And so you can't just say, okay, we hired you, and then walk away and that's it. You need to create a support system or a defense system that will kick into action when these attacks are leveled at, you know, at someone like that, even which you wouldn't need if a white male is the leader. So it's kind of interesting that, you know, even though this person may be extremely talented, they're maybe the color of their skin. So they do need, and when I say support system, I don't mean because there's something deficient in them. We just have to be prepared to be able to defend against those potential detractors.
Yeah, I mean, and what I also hope eventually is that it isn't just women fighting, you know, for their way, or DEI fighting for their way, but that there's some kind of unity in that men and women, people of diverse cultural backgrounds, that you get on each other's team. And it's like the old idea of sort of a meritocracy. People should be given a lot of different opportunity. I mean, that was somewhat interesting for people, that just returning to Barbie for 1 second, that Barbie was actually written by both a man and a woman, a married couple. And that there was, sort of a man's voice in there fighting the women's issues as well, because you want to feel like there's a kind of a cohesive way. If anyone's going to move forward, it's going to be because everybody's getting on board, not just, fighting.
Right. Well, I think everybody's voice has to be heard in some ways. And so right now, the DEI voice is heard, very prominently. But we need to hear from, the people who have been victimized in that kind of situation.
And we have to hear from these unheard voices, because truthfully, I mean, if you go back to in American history and business, how many people ended up getting, the job or the promotion because their uncle was the head, that it was, so it's like, it's always been somebody was getting the leg up. Somebody was always getting the leg up. And so you also sometimes feel in the diversity conversation, as someone who is not diverse, but I have a child who is a diversity student who's adopted. And I actually really notice even nowadays that she has to, sometimes she has to walk in double step in order to make the same impression. And, it's changing. So we're going to hail the progress, but we're not fully there yet. So maybe that but your ultimate message, and I think Nick's is promote the positive.
Right.
Because
to really focus on solutions.
Yeah.
And not just the problems. So
yeah, I mean, because problems if people feel there's nothing that they can latch on to do themselves, that's how they drop out. It's like, I'm going to stay in the fight because I'm going to do small things, and then small things in groups can actually move to big things.
Yes, absolutely. That's why build communities and work within the communities, because you have more people power, but it's always going to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Hopefully not always. I think we probably answered most of our questions. Daniel's back.
Hi, thank you both so much. This is a fascinating conversation and incredible insights. Thank you to our audience for really some amazing engagement and some questions. Are there ways for folks to connect with y'all, continue to connect with y'all offline, social media, etc.?
Yes.
And they can send notes to you. You can send them on.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Continuing the thread of community, right? Sort of keeping the conversation going.
And I will certainly say for myself that the opportunity to work with Nick and Sheryl over these past now many years, I think we first met in like 2009-10, has been, an utter honor. And I get to do the
likewise.
I get to do the shout out of go to Christoph Farms and drink cider, drink cider and delicious wines, because she's a woman of many business sets and skills, and now she's a vintner.
Oh, I love the background change. Well, you don't need to tell me twice. We're ready. Well, again, Maro and Sheryl, thank you both so much. It's really been an incredible honor to have you with us this afternoon, this evening, and we look forward to seeing your next projects in the works.
Yes, and thank you,
Daniel.
Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
and thank
Bye,
you
everybody. Thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a great evening.